Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So, why does it feel like everyone needs to be involved in everything? Why don't leaders seem to be making progress on the things that matter? So, we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Jurriaan Kamer today. So, organizations are inherently designed for predictability, but that predictability is clashing with an unpredictable world, and the cracks are really starting to show. So, in this episode, we explore why sense and respond is overtaking plan and predict as the blueprint for the future. Now, we couldn't be happier to welcome Jurriaan to the session today. He's a speaker, an author, an organization designer, and a change agent as well. And most importantly, he's author of the book Unblock, and it's a practical book for leaders who need to drastically achieve better outcomes and quickly as well. Now, Danny has absolutely devoured this book. Danny, do you want to just show the book?
Yes.
And the bacon bookmarks. So it's the highest accolade we can give to any author we have on there, judging by the number of bookmarks that we have on there as well. It's a brilliant book and it's really practical. And we really want to make sure that this book ends up in the hands of HR leaders, OD leaders, and most importantly, your leaders in your organization as well. So it's all about unblocking your organization and clearing the way for results in developing thriving employees, teams, and your organization as well. So it's a practical book. And the really big thing is it's all about how you actually unblock your organization and get it moving as well. Now, we know Jurriaan from a number of different sources. We're huge fans of his. We're regular subscribers of his newsletters. We're consultants. We're out in the field doing our work, and we go back to his work to help us feel grounded when things get difficult as well. He offers consulting services, and he's also the co-author of the book Formula X, and that's a business book all about speed, leadership, and organizational change. As you'd expect with the practitioner with this experience out in the field, he's got lots of professional qualifications that underpin his experience. He has an MBA, an MSc in process management, and he has a Bachelor of Science in computer science as well. And he's based out of Utrecht in the Netherlands, snowy Netherlands today, isn't it? So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And you did your homework. Awesome. Thank you.
Always do our homework.
Just kick us off. So Unblock, and say I'm a big fan of the book, really enjoyed it. Just tell us a bit about it. What inspired you to write it?
Yeah, so it's a collection of all the things I've been putting into practice over the last, I'd say, I don't know, like 5 to 10 years. I've been inspired by all the frameworks and all the methodologies out there, but what didn't work is implementing a big blueprint or like a framework from start to finish. So I've always been a believer in mixing things and getting the things out of us, out of all the inspirational things you can do and mixing them together. But I have found a bunch of things that consistently work, and just decided to write a more practical book about it. There's lots of great books out there with inspiration and lots of case studies and examples, but I was missing the workbook, and especially the leader's workbook. So that's what I tried to write.
And what is it you hope that leaders are going to take away from it? They read your book, what do you want them to do differently?
Because of the modular nature of the book, it covers 6 of the most common organizational blockers. And I want them to really get started and take one of those at least and start changing things. And it could be anything. Like the start of the book is about strategy formulation, strategy creation. That's an important thing that leaders often get wrong. Then there's a lot about decision making and how to accelerate that. There's a lot about how to create a culture of ownership, how to build psychological safety. So it's a lot of different things. And the book is designed to be you don't need to read it cover to cover. You can actually go to the chapter that speaks to you most and then take that. And that's in the end, my intention with the book is that people use it for their benefit.
So for people who've not read it, kind of unpacked a little bit there, what are the 6? Because there's 6 elements out there of Unblock that you recommend. What are they?
Yeah, so it starts with strategy, creating a strategy that actually creates focus and alignment at scale. And then alternatives for the traditional strategy cascade.
You talk about strategy and integrating strategy, don't you, rather than cascading? So
exactly.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so strategy, like you said, like the cascade literally means going from top to bottom. It's the waterfall that only flows down. I've never seen a waterfall flow up or cascade up. That doesn't happen. And that's problematic because a lot of strategy initiatives fail because when the moment the plans hit the day-to-day reality, they either fizzle out or they just don't work, right? And so that's why you need to integrate. You need to connect the dots between day-to-day reality and your ambitions. and leverage the wisdom of the crowd to shape it and to find a way to actually get it in place. And that's often missed. Like it's often, we reveal the strategy, we make beautiful PowerPoint decks, we organize awesome leadership events to broadcast it to everyone, and now we're done, right? Now we can just do it, right? Can we just now execute and stop talking about the strategy? Yeah, it's just something that's missed a lot, and especially in complexity, that won't work. But it's usually important to have good strategy and to position your organization and get everybody along.
Yeah, so strategy is the first one then.
Yeah,
and then...
yeah. So it goes on. So strategy is about that. Then we have steering, which is all about setting goals, creating a rhythm of outcomes, and finding metrics and KPIs that are helpful to measure rather than drowning in KPIs. So it's steering metrics. So that's the steering chapter. Then we talk about decision making, because along the way you'll have lots of decisions to make, and that's often something that people get stuck in. I talk about developing an organization where people are willing to take ownership. Ownership is a big complaint from a lot of leaders that I talk to. Like, they don't seem to take ownership, and why are they not taking ownership? And then I've given them ownership, which is another weird thing to say because ownership can only be taken, not given. So yeah, there's a couple of conditions that you have to get right for that to happen. Then we go into teamwork, which is the more foundational thing about psychological safety, developing a habit of reflection and improvement, and giving and receiving feedback, especially at the leadership team level. That is sometimes missing. And then finally, meetings. So how do you connect all the dots with your meetings, reducing meeting overload in an organization, and replacing unhelpful meetings with a lightweight structure of rhythms.
And the question I had, I know you said it's modular and people can dip in and dip out where they kind of feel moved. If people just don't know, they go, this just isn't working, where would you suggest they start?
So yeah, I've paired the book with a self-assessment that could help you answer that question. It's a 5-minute survey that gives you an idea. I think people usually do know where they're stuck. I think where people get stuck is maybe they think that everything needs to be changed. And if they look at these 6 elements, they're like, oh, all of it is problematic. Like, I don't know where to start. But the point is more that you start and actually find a place to do something small, and then you'll uncover what else is behind that and what is next. And if you follow the thread, you'll end up discovering the root causes of some of the challenges. I mean, people drown in meetings, but meetings is often not it's often a symptom of something else that's underneath. So if you start, sending people, how to have a productive meeting, and encouraging people, putting posters on the wall, like if there's no agenda, we should cancel, or, all those things are great, but there's often an underlying symptom of lack of clarity about who can make what decision, or maybe there's a lack of prioritization. There's all sorts of things that are causing these meetings to go on. And just, my point I'm trying to make is start somewhere, but you'll uncover what is really the challenge by starting making some changes.
Sorry, I know, Garen, you've probably
got so many questions. Okay, right. It's almost like when you go to a meal and you love everything on the menu. So it's like, right, where do we start?
Yeah.
So there's loads of interesting things there. I guess just fundamentally, because obviously you work as a consultant, we work as consultants, and you go in and organizations are full of very smart people, but the things that they do are the mistakes or challenges that they have are sometimes very basic fixes, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And what you're inviting them in to do, which is, to give up more control or whatever it is, that facade of control, when you're inviting people into the strategic process.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think organizations are so stuck in that way? What do you think some of the reasons might be? I know every context is different, but what are some of the key themes that you're seeing in organizations?
The people that are in power have been growing up throughout their careers and throughout their organization, and have been promoted for having the right answer, have been promoted for getting things done, sometimes by taking a lot of control and reducing autonomy. Not all of them. Like there's awesome leaders out there that understand that, if you want to have a great organization with great results, you want both autonomy and alignment. But there's a lot of leaders out there that have been grown up with these misconceptions about what leadership is and what management is, and that just has an outsized effect on how the organization is being built, based on control systems, on reporting lines, on the notion that when you enter a new organization for the first time, you have no authority whatsoever until you get permission for it, which is the default. And I really strongly believe in trying to flip that equation and creating more initiative taking and autonomy for the better of the business. So yeah, I think so. It's part of a generation that's growing up, and the fact that a lot of the typical business books and MBAs don't teach the more progressive stuff.
Yeah, and I guess in organizations there's a lot of learned helplessness almost, isn't there?
Yeah.
We're in an organization this week, and really, really driven, clever people. But some of the things they were saying, which is like, really basic sort of, I need to ask my manager permission to have some time to do something, and rather than sort of taking that initiative as well. And if you are encouraging people into taking ownership, how do you start that process? Because sometimes people may have taken ownership in the past and had their fingers burnt as well.
Yeah, and those past experiences really paralyze an organization. So you have to be careful. I think the first thing, if you're a leader and you see this as a challenge, then the one thing you can do is to be more aware of it and break the self-reinforcing cycle of permission seeking and permission giving. Because the moment somebody asks you for permission and you go along with that, because you want to be helpful and you feel it's like a mini dopamine rush, like I can actually do something for someone else, and I'll be so it feels good to give someone permission. But be aware of that, break that cycle, don't give the permission, and coach them to make the decision themselves. And then figure out like why is this happening? Like why is it unclear that I actually expect that people can do this themselves? And then it's helpful to create some explicit boundaries to say, you know what, within these boundaries you are free to act, and I don't want to give permission. I don't want you to bother me basically with doing that, and I actually expect that if it's within these decision rights or within these boundaries, you can go and do it. And one example that I really love using is the waterline. It's inspired by W. L. Gore, the makers of guitar strings and Gore-Tex. They said, if imagine you're all on a ship and something blows up and it's above the waterline, it's definitely frustrating, and the boat has to go back to shore and repair it, but the ship won't sink. And so be careful, especially for things that are under the waterline, and be more and more risk averse there. But we can clarify what that waterline is for our organization, our department, our team, and say, everything above that waterline, don't bother leaders, don't go ask for permission, just go and do it.
There's a lot of really good content that you put out on YouTube, and one of the things you were sort of saying about your methodology, which we thought was really, really interesting, is that you don't necessarily do diagnostics in organizations. What you do is you actually bring them together and do this really exotic thing, talk to understand what's going on. Could you just walk us through that methodology and how it produces different results?
At Unblock, we're big fans of start by starting, by being in the work with the people to understand what happens, rather than either putting them in a separate research environment, like a separate survey environment or a separate training environment. I think it's more helpful to be in the work with leaders or with teams and say, you're facing a decision right now. Okay, let's do that a little bit differently than what you're used to. Or hey, your facility, you're running an offsite. Okay, let's still do the offsite, try to achieve the objectives, but do it in a more progressive way. And that's how you teach and make an influence. Because I think diagnostics are great. They might look good on paper, but it doesn't change anything most of the time, right? It's like great, you can spend a lot of time in an organization and bill them some money to create a beautiful report of all the challenges. And definitely it's helpful. And there's a lot of leaders out there that really want to win and be the best. So if they get a report which shows them that they have a low grade on something, of course it might create some momentum. But most of the time people already know what the challenges are, right? You don't really need to do diagnostic. And also there's also an illusion, like we said before, the complexity is high. So if you think you know what the problem is, you only uncover if that's really the problem by changing something and discovering what really is happening now. So it's the survey instrument is overrated in my perspective.
And how do you work with clients? Because clients sometimes like certainty and they like to know what's going to happen, whereas what you propose, that methodology is much more emergent, and we're going to kind of work with it and see what happens. How do you square that in terms of kind of getting over that drive for, I want to know what's going to happen and I want to know exactly the steps on the process?
There's a coaching opportunity there immediately. If somebody says that, there's often a false sense of control and a false sense of certainty. The thing you can make very certain is, we're going to, every 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to sit down and talk about how it's going. We're going to make progress transparent. We're going to make failures transparent. We're going to involve leaders in doing the change. And we're going to try a lot of different things and see what works and what doesn't work. And that's, in itself, that is helpful. But the moment somebody asks for a 6-month roadmap of the change, we either say, you know what, let's talk about your worldview about how these things work, or let's talk about the last time you tried that and how accurate the plan was and how much time we're going to waste by making this plan, you know. So it's
well, you're naming it, aren't you?
Yeah, and that looks and then some leaders don't want to work with us, and that's fine.
It's not the right mate, not the right fit, is it?
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
There's loads of really lovely phrases that come out of the book, and one of the phrases you talk about is harmony addiction, and that gets in the way of things. Just for those that are watching, that are introduced into that concept, what is it, and how can you start to address it?
Yeah, harmony addiction is a state where nobody in the team wants to create conflict, and conflict is this word that feels bad, or has a lot of negative connotation, but it's about constructive conflict, and basically speaking up and disagreeing when you hear something that is not right, or when you see actions being taken that is not good for the business. And, it's about this safety and psychological safety for people to speak up. And part of the problems with harmony addiction is that you get a lot of slow decision making, because people want to make sure that all the voices are heard and everybody agrees before you move forward. And that is paralyzing.
You've got a really interesting background, and I understand that you kind of sort of started out in the IT world, which is almost a culture within a culture in an organization, isn't it? Because that's where things like agile can thrive. And agile is it's not necessarily a process, it's a way of being and an orientation to the world, isn't it? So how's that informed your work and your practice and your writing as well?
Yeah, I did start out as a software developer myself. So I suffered through as a craftsman, you sometimes suffer from the management systems rather than that they are helping you and enabling you to make good stuff. So I felt like firsthand the problem sometimes in more traditional project management that we had at the time. So when I was able to, and over time I got roles as a chief technology officer and manager of groups of software development teams. So I became more obsessed with the problem of how do you organize this and still be coherent and create high productivity and high productive software and good products.
CTO is the toughest job in an organization.
In some organizations it is. Yeah, it really depends, I guess. But yeah, so that's the moment where I started to try to influence the rest of the organization to get along the journey of, we're accelerating how we make software here. We have to, because we have to digitalize, we have to make our products valuable and digital, but we are held back by the rest of the organization. So at the beginning there was a lot of frustration there, but then I started on a journey to find methodologies and other thought leaders and other organizations that were modeling agile type principles or agile type ways of working completely outside of IT. So I completely widened my field and discovered sociocracy, holacracy. I discovered responsive org, and I started working with Aaron Dignan from The Ready, who wrote Brave New Work. And that in itself was an interesting experiment with an organization that we grew to 50 people and being completely self-managed. So yeah, so I really lean into trying to find other schools of thought, and it's all mixed in my craft these days.
And what aspects of your work, whether it's the writing or the consulting or the speaking, do you find most fulfilling or exciting, and why?
Well, in the end, it's the most fulfilling is being in the room, running a workshop with a team and coaching them and guiding them through some of these changes and getting all these aha moments and seeing the impact over time. I also really enjoy speaking. It's just a rush. I think it's fun, and I've used a lot of metaphors from the world of Formula One motorsport. So it's always fun to inspire others with something that you're really excited about. And but yeah, over time, like the longer term engagements are more interesting, because then you'll see the actual change. If you go on stage and do a speech, that usually doesn't change much. It might be in the moment entertainment, but down the line, it won't have a big effect unless it's connected to a longer term engagement.
And then on the flip side, what do you find most challenging about the work that you do?
Well, the thing I'm currently still stuck on is how do you get people to see this work as oxygen rather than candy? So in an economic downturn where a lot of companies are cost cutting and getting rid of a lot of coach positions, that's the current reality we're in. And there's definitely clients out there that are still, demanding this work, but there's a lot of organizations that see this like, it's like a luxury to get consultants in to develop organizations. We can do without that for a while. And the reality is that a lot of the costs that are not on the balance sheet is actually hidden in their organizational depth and their lack of adaptivity. So yeah, I'm still puzzling with that thing, and I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of CFOs and talking to them, but it's something I haven't cracked yet. So if somebody does, reach out to me and love to talk about it.
I think the other challenge we see is kind of when's the time when is the right time to do this work? There's often like well, when the team's stable, or when this happens, there's kind of that we'll wait.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a right time, or is it just get going, whatever conditions you're in, do the work?
There's always a right time. Yeah, you can always start because there's always something to improve. I'm thinking a lot about these shocks to the system, like big reorgs that still happen a lot. Either firing round or somebody from a big consultancy firm coming in and drawing a new org chart, and then everybody has to reapply to their roles, and those are pretty traumatic experience sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm being triggered. So,
oh yeah. Do you need to take some breath?
I think I might.
All right, yeah. The moment that happens, like that's not the time I want to be around, honestly, because the moment the decision is made that that's the type of change somebody wants, I'm not sure if I'm the right consultant for that. But I often come after that to pick up the pieces and to put teams back together and getting the org model to work in practice, because it often doesn't.
Obviously, you're releasing the book, and a big part of that is going out and speaking to lots of different organizations, and it's just it's a really interesting process. Are you seeing any sort of emerging trends or even sort of common themes that are emerging from all the organizations and people that you're talking to at the moment?
Yeah, a lot about it's connected to what I said earlier about the golden years of Agile are over. We had all these trends. We had a period where everybody was doing lean, and we had Lean Six Sigma black belts running around. Then we had a lot of people doing Agile, and people were having Agile coaches running around, permanent positions with those names. That is definitely over at the moment. And the thing that I think is still helpful is, and I'm still experimenting with these terms because our consultancy is very young. I'm focusing more on organizational effectiveness as a term these days. It's more broadly encapsulating the idea that the organization needs to be effective in achieving the organizational goals, and whatever that means underneath. You can have buzzwords, but that's in the end what it is, right? And that seems to resonate, but still, like it's still a quest.
Are there any questions about your work that people don't ask you you'd love to talk about?
Yeah, I think the one thing that comes to mind is the return on investment on this work. And I think in the OD world, we sometimes underestimate the importance of that. And we just say, well, everybody can see it's better, right? People are happy.
I feel better.
It feels great, right? To have more autonomy. So why do we need to have an ROI on this? And obviously measuring the impact of this work is not always easy. We do it consistently with our clients. We do use surveys, not to diagnose their problems, but to measure the effect of our engagements. And often our engagements are the ROI is positive after only 2 or 3 months of work. You can see a measurable impact in terms of better collaboration, less wasted time in meetings, less interruptions, less time waiting for permission. All those things, they look positive. And if you calculate that until like salaries that are being redeployed to doing more useful activities, you can do that, and you can measure the impacts. And I recommend everybody to get good at that. It's not easy. It's not something that we learn a lot in our field, but it is helpful.
One question that Danny and I, because we were having a chat about the book yesterday, and something that you talked about is an alternative to RACI. Obviously, it's that well-known management tool. Everyone walks away from the room feeling very confident and very clear. Yep. Yet we all know what happens, don't we? What drove you to put it in the book, and what is that alternative that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's just sometimes nice to completely break down a method that everybody uses and don't question. Well, there's a lot of people questioning it, honestly. A lot of leaders hate it, but still do it because there's no good alternative. And the RACI matrix is I used a quote that somebody said, which is like it's a cover your behind game before the work even starts. Right? It's really there. Like we don't start the work here. We're first gonna write down whose head we're gonna chop off when this goes wrong. And then
it's used for that.
It is what it is. And then you get in a discussion between what's the difference between responsible and accountable? Well, if you go to the Oxford Dictionary, it's the same. It's like they're synonyms. So yeah, anyway, so of course, if you do RACI really well, it might have benefits. And in the end, I really believe that there's a lot of value in clarifying who can make what decision. But the method is just archaic and outdated. And so in the book, we talk about role-based work and identifying roles, and connected to those roles are decision rights. And as a third layer, you can have decision rights where you need to ask for advice before you can make a decision. And those three elements are more flexible and can be super helpful in clarifying who can make what decision, but also how you're going to make what decision. And that's something that RACI doesn't support.
Yeah, because I think almost like it's a pseudo decision. Lots of teams make pseudo decisions. We kind of agreed that we've done something, but we haven't really, and we kind of know that we haven't done it as well, but we collude, don't we, as well? What do you do to keep learning and evolving in your field? You sound like you're very open. You're always looking at new methodologies. And are there any sort of particular practices or habits that you find like especially useful to keep that learning alive?
I do listen to a lot of podcasts, read a bunch of books every year. Two other things. I think whenever there's an interesting case somewhere or a hint of an organization that is doing it differently and is progressive, I try to make an effort to learn more about them, to either go visit them. And over the years, especially in the first couple of years when I started learning about this, I went to a whole tour through Silicon Valley and spent a couple of months at Spotify in Sweden when they were still growing. So like those case studies are nice, but the reality on the ground is often different. So go and talk to people and ask them about their experience at work and see what you can learn from that is something I keep doing. And then on the personal development space, I think roughly once a year, I do some self-work that is more about that could either be individual therapy if I'm wrestling with something, or could more like a cohort-based learning experience where it's really a lot more about your inner self. In the end, you bring yourself as instruments to work. So it's good to do some maintenance on it sometimes.
And it's really fascinating because often organizations like Spotify are sort of cited as the example, and they're kind of thrown around with people actually really not understanding the reality. So we've been in organizations going, right, we're going to have squads and guilds and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, well, really, like, is that really going to operationalize itself? And do you know what's required? But for you to actually go behind the scenes and actually see how it actually is in practice, when you see how it's talked about in the public domain versus the reality, how different is that?
Oh, it's really different, and it's missing the point on some foundational principles often. Like it's easy to see the org chart and say, we can copy that, but it's much harder to grasp the underlying principles, but also the culture that enables it to work. And that could be country culture, like the Swedish have a specific way of talking to each other and being with each other that makes the Spotify what it is, the Spotify model what it is. And then thirdly, the business context is often very different, right? The moment a lot of the banks started adopting the Spotify model, I always asked them, like, do you have an ambition to grow a music player and be great at streaming music? And they said, no, of course not. Well, then why are you copying this model? Because that was the model it was for. And one of my best read articles, it's already a bunch of years old, but it's how to build your own Spotify model. So what I advocate for in that article is definitely look at it and definitely take your inspiration from it. Figure out what are some of the ideas in there that can be really useful, but then take it apart and say, these things are going to help us with our specific problems, and these things won't. And just take it apart and build your own. That is what I really believe in.
So if you reflect so far on the work you've done, the experience you have, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned that you think would be valuable for others to know?
That's a really broad question.
Yes.
I think one thing that comes to mind is often when we go into organizations, we talk to leaders and we talk to individual contributors or the teams or whatever you want to call them. And we sometimes hear leaders say, what, our people, they don't get it. Maybe we need different people, we need new blood in the organization, like they are stuck. We've explained the strategy so many times and they still don't seem to understand it. But then when you go and talk to the people, they're like, oh man, those leaders, they're just they're just telling us the direction to go in, but they really don't understand their day-to-day realities. And whatever they're talking from their ivory tower, it just doesn't connect with me. They don't listen to what I actually need to do my work better. And I think there's a huge disconnect between those worlds sometimes. And it's just extremely helpful to, like Jurriaan said before, get them to talk and to connect the dots, to connect those layers, not the dots, but actually to get those layers of realities to talk to each other, to resonate with each other, and to bake that into the system so it is more healthy, right? Leaders have certain positions, so they are able to see some things that the rest of the organization doesn't see. But vice versa, if you're interacting with customers every day, you have a perspective that the leaders probably don't have. So a lot of our work is about connecting those layers, and it's also about turning complaints and frustration into action. I definitely have had my grudges against the C-suite when I was in a big corporate, and I was just like, why don't they get it, right? It's not that difficult. But then when I was able to actually stand next to them and work with them, I understood the complexity of their situation they were in. So that's what it's about. It's leaders in the end are doing everything with the right intentions, but sometimes the methods they deploy is not helpful, and it's our job to make them aware of that and give them alternatives.
More organizations did that, there would be
Yeah.
a lot less work for us to do. So obviously you've got your book Unblock. Is there another resource you'd recommend or you particularly love that you think think if other people were aware of it, you'd love them to know about it?
I think one of the biggest experiments right now or cases in our field is the world of Hire, and the Chinese appliance manufacturer that is working in 4,000 or 5,000 self-managing teams, micro enterprises they call them. So if you want to learn more about that, unfortunately, a lot of the documentation out there is in Chinese, so it's not so easy and not so accessible. But Gary Hamel and Mikhail Zanini did a great work in their book Humanocracy to unpack some of those ideas and principles. So I would definitely let people look at that, and also attend some of the public webinars of the agriculture and pharmaceutical company Bayer, who's pioneering this at the moment. So Bill Anderson, the CEO, he joined, I think, about a year ago, and he is announcing a new model called dynamic shared ownership, which is basically in a lot of ways applying the principles of Hire, moving the 100 or 200,000 people that work at Bayer into self-organizing teams. And they're pretty public about it. So that's nice. Like there's videos out there and articles to give a sense. And hopefully time will tell what we can learn from those two progressive organizational changes.
And final question, one of the regional drivers behind this podcast is to inspire the next generation of organization development and design consultants, whether you're internal, external, whether you're just starting out or whether you're considering. What advice would you give someone who's starting out now in today's context about how can you make this learning curve a little less steep, for example?
There's a couple of things that come to mind, but I think the skill of facilitation is something that could be built more in this world, both in practitioners, but also in leaders themselves. I think if you're able to facilitate groups of people of all sizes to get to meaningful outcomes together, that's just such a powerful skill that is underutilized. There's companies like I've discovered companies out there. For example, IKEA, they have a lot of people on the payroll that have really good facilitation skills. It's just a huge competitive advantage if you're able to do that, and I think it makes your work as practitioner much easier. It allows you to get out of this idea of death by PowerPoint in large gatherings, right? And I think so. Facilitation and workshop design is something that is more practical than being able to cite all the theoretical models and all the case studies out there. It's in the end, it's all about people getting to talk to each other and getting to meaningful outcomes. And liberating structures is a great way to start, great place to start, at least to get some ideas. And in the end, facilitation is only learned through practice. But
Jurriaan, we want to say a huge thank you. It's been like an injection of caffeine into our brains after a very busy week to spend some time with you. And reading the book has been a real source of joy, and we really recommend people to read that. If people want to follow your work or find the book, obviously all the things we're going to share in the show notes. So whether you're listening on audio or watching the video, all of those links will be in the show notes. But how can people follow your work and keep up to date?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so follow me there. The book can be found on Amazon, and unblockbook.net is also a place where you can find more information about the book. And LinkedIn is the main place where I publish everything.
And Danny, what are you taking away from today's conversation?
Like where to start? There's so many things. I loved what you said at the beginning, early in the conversation about breaking that kind of power giving, power asking kind of cycle and breaking that down. The thing that will stick in my head is the idea of the work that we do is oxygen versus candy. Is it nice to have, or is it just the foundational things that kind of the organization living and breathing? And I think context is king as well when you're kind of applying techniques or models. Don't just replicate something that somebody else is doing, and you really need to understand what you're trying to achieve and tailor it for your organization.
Brilliant. And for me, all of those things, just to add to it, I think you talk about the power of facilitation for leaders, how to convene groups together to exchange information and dialogue and build connections is so important. And also just challenging tools that we just use that we know are crap. Just somebody say stop, and can we just do this in a different way, just so that this works as well. So thank you so much. We as practitioners, we're so glad that authors like yourself are bringing consulting experience and applying it into books. We really want to make sure this book gets into the hands of leaders and HR leaders across organizations as well. So thank you so much. Jurriaan's episode joins our brilliant and building portfolio of different OD practitioners, internal and external, from across the world. So if you've enjoyed the episode, please feel free to hit the like button. If you've got a comment on any of the amazing things that Jurriaan has shared today, we'd love that. And also subscribe to the channel as well, because obviously the channel gets bigger all the time, and also the algorithm gods really appreciate it too. So thank you so much. But most importantly, thank you so much, Jurriaan. It's been a brilliant episode. I can't wait to sit down and edit this and watch it all over again. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.